Hello, and welcome to the Recovery Out Loud Berg Speaker Series. My name is Yvonne. I'm a person in long term recovery and glad that you are back to join us. So, we're still here celebrating National Recovery Month for the month of September. According to SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, there are 23 million Americans living in long term recovery. And what we do know is that there are 33,000 people here in Berks County alone that are living in long-term recovery. And so what we do know is that recovery is possible. We also know that there are various pathways in which people find wellbriety, sobriety, recovery, whatever great terminology that you want to utilize to say that people have changed the quality of their life and they are sober. And not only are they sober, but they're giving back to the community tenfold. Tonight is no different, as we've had speakers in the past talk about different pathways to recovery. We have another individual that is with us tonight, and I know you're going to be just as excited to hear from him as I am. And I want to introduce you to Robert D. He's a really good friend of mine, and he's just thrilled to be here. So, Robert, I'm going to turn it over to you and take it away.
All right. Thank you, Yvonne. Hello, everybody. Good evening. How's everybody doing? I'm hoping that you can hear me clear, and I'm so happy and blessed to be here. I want to thank COCA, the Council on Chemical Abuse, the RISE Center board, and of course Yvonne and Jen on the background for allowing me to and honoring me to be able to speak to you and share my story, my life of turmoil to the life I treasure, and share with you a little bit of my pathway to recovery and how I became the man I am today. But I just want to say one thing. You can't find relief living a fast life, selling drugs, gang banging, street thugging up all night. Police cars chasing, crazies racing, while you're driving and ducking, your homeboys blazing. Heading for disaster, shouts of laughter, overpower the crowds trying to stop you for being mangled and tangled, pinched out, strangled across the street. Two B-boys dancing to the drummer's beat. Too late, car explodes, hitting the front gate. Loud boom so profound, people standing around, curious at what just happened with no smile but a frown on every face. With shock and amazement, a deadly arrangement. All involved, dead on the pavement. I can't entertain it. Many are battered and bruised, so confused. Real life stresses and drugs abuse. Pain seen through the teardrops in their eyes, filled with turmoil and despair in their lives. Wake up. As a young man, I witnessed addiction and violence that made my life a struggle. I was born to two young parents that partied everywhere they went and tagged me along. My father was an alcoholic and a drug abuser. My mother was a follower at first, but eventually learned to use drugs and or herself to get what she needed. Even, especially for survival after my father left us when I was 3 years old. Even then, my mother had to do whatever she needed to do in order for us to eat and or have a place to stay. Even as a child, I knew there was something wrong with mom and dad, especially when I can literally see and or hear people partying, arguing, and fighting. Later, my mom met a man who would eventually become my stepfather. In the beginning, things were great, but then there was drug use that led to partying, domestic violence, which became another reality in my life. As I grew up, I witnessed my mother using drugs and men. She was also being used and abused by my stepfather, who also physically abused me. It was difficult, but also a learning experience. Since my stepfather, although very stern and strict, also taught me how to take care of myself. At a young age, there were times when I took care of my stepdad when he was dope sick, or my mom when she either was dope sick or hungover, or physically in pain from the abuse my stepdad or other boyfriends inflicted on her almost daily. I have witnessed many overdoses as a child, teen, young adult, up to my adult age. Unfortunately, many died and only a few survived. However, sadly, many of the few that survived would later die due to overdoses they experienced because of their disease to addiction. By the time I became a teenager, things had escalated into the worst part of my life. I wouldn't wish on anyone. I literally lived in a shooting gallery where my mother sold and or rented works, syringes to use for getting high on heroin. Moreover, she rented crack pipes so that others could get high on crack. So my home was a crack den. I have even accompanied my parents to methadone clinics for their treatment for maintenance. At this point, I lied to everybody about my parents' life. I hid the drugs and the paraphernalia from everyone, including the cops. I lied to my teachers and family members, even when I came over to get food for us because my mother did not have money to feed us. This lifestyle went on for years, so many years, that I eventually used what I witnessed and experienced as a way of life. I became an enabler, a codependent to both my stepfather and my mother. My stepfather will harass me and manipulate me into bringing food home for him from my grandparents' home, which he was no longer allowed because he had stolen from them. This eventually became the norm, and I would just go along with it and lie to my grandparents as to why I needed to bring food home, not saying that my stepfather threatened me into it and that we did not have money for food because my parents used it up for drugs. This experience, though harsh, taught me how to later become a liar and a manipulator. So much that everywhere I went, I lied for my parents, whether it was for school, food, or because they did not want people to know where they were or what they were up to. Later in life, I ran the streets in full throttle. The enabler and codependent in me came along for the ride, but this time it was with my friends. For a long time, I could live a normal life without trying to impress others. This was how I felt, and I could be accepted or fit in with the crowd. It really did not matter who it was for what reason. I was good at it, and so I thought, and so did everyone else. I lied for friends in so many ways that looking back, I probably did more harm than help. Not only was it to my parents of friends that I had, but I lied and pretended in support of friends in legal ways too. I lied to the police, I lied to the probation officer, I lied to teachers, I lied to employers, I lied, lie after lie. It was so common. I did not realize that this behavior would eventually damage good relationships, nor did I care at the time. One thing I knew was the street code: see nothing, say nothing, loyalty earns respect. The one thing I cared more in my life was acceptance from anyone, because I did not have it at home, and at least I did not feel or see it. The lifestyle of manipulation, enabling, and codependency was a way of life for generations in my immediate and extended families. The only way to help each other, no matter what. And this rule was implemented into my brain from childhood all the way to my adulthood. The notion of I can't do that was taboo and not accepted. You either did it or you would be dealt with later. Trying to minimize or get out the situation was not an option. Looking back at the experiences I had, I can say it led me to the life of drug addiction and crime. In 1991 to 1993, I was incarcerated in the New York State Correctional Facility. I also spent time at Rikers Island and a few other upstate correctional facilities. Prior to going to Rikers Island, I was in and out of jail. I struggled with drugs and alcohol, which led to divorce from my first marriage and eventually losing my job. I was living with my godmother, who at the time would be the only person I could depend on. However, I burnt that bridge and she told me I had to leave. With nowhere to go, I decided I needed to take the advice I was given several times throughout the years to seek professional help. Even through family interventions, I ignored it. I reached out to my Uncle Danny for the first help. And later during the same day, my Uncle Rodney, who used to get high with me and constantly torment me with sermons. I believe now and then was used by God to plant a seed of hope in me. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Rodney. I always confided in my uncle. And when I poured out in tears my pain, he told me that I should try Teen Challenge. At first, I was taken back because I thought he was joking with me. I said to him, Teen Challenge? That's for teenagers. But he assured me it was not only for teens and reminded me of all the times he would talk about Nicky Cruz's crusade. Not to mention my Uncle Bappo. Rest in peace, dear. Then it hit me. I just saw a movie called The Crossing the Switchblade. That movie depicts the story of Pastor Dave Wilkerson, Nicky Cruz, and the beginnings of Teen Challenge, a faith-based rehabilitation program. So I decided to make an appointment. And a week later, I met with Brother Murrow. Good man. The intake coordinator at the time of Brooklyn Teen Challenge. I spoke with him and explained my situation and what my religious background was like. I told him that growing up, I was exposed to Catholicism, Pentecostal traditions, and the Jehovah's Witness faith. And that at one point, I was a member of the Islam 5% Nation. And while in prison, a member of one of the largest Latin street gangs worldwide, with beliefs that were diverse in religion and paganism. I attended Brooklyn Teen Challenge and completed the 4-month induction phase, then transferred to God's Mountain. At the time was Teen Challenge Training Center. Today, it's Pennsylvania Adult and Teen Challenge, but still, it's God's Mountain. I completed an 8 months and graduated February 26, 2010. Directly after I graduated, I committed myself to a position as a volunteer driver for the Walkathon ministry. Walkathon? And several off-campus job sites for 6 months. I then transitioned into an intern position. I would later be invited to serve as the ministry team leader for many ministries. An example, the Teen Challenge Disciples. Peace and love to the TCD boys. A Christian hip hop ministry whose vision and mission is to spread the gospel by utilizing the 5 elements of hip hop music in a Christian loving way. We spread the gospel through the gift of music. New Creation Choir, the Spanish worship team in collaboration with Pastor Jose Ortiz and the group Renovación Grupo, an off-campus Latin ministry. The prison team, at that time, Brother Poteet was my leader, and Stay Sharp, a drug intervention program. And my leader then was Joe Jakubowski, who was my mentor. In September 2011, I was promoted to an apprentice and transitioned into an assistant counseling position for the counseling division at Teen Challenge. In March of 2012, I became a full-time staff member serving as an assistant counselor. In addition, I graduated from Alvernia University with a bachelor's in addiction studies and behavioral health sciences, which then at Teen Challenge, I became a full counselor. I later graduated with my master's in community leadership. I received my state certification for certified recovery specialist, recovery coach, intervention professional, and then my CADC, which is a certified alcohol and drug counselor. I worked as a bilingual clinician for outpatient services and a co-occurrence specialist for the ACT Team program out of Berks Counseling Center. I am the president, CEO of Walk It Out Recovery Services, LLC, and currently work at Haven Behavioral Health Hospital as an activity therapist for social services. I have volunteered at PAATC for the Disciples Christian Ministry, said that 3 times, right? And I have volunteered volunteered to lead a Spanish support group for the men. I have volunteered at the FCI school for federal prison for religious services, as well as the Spanish Committee for the Council on Chemical Abuse and OMSA's Child Advisory Committee. I am on the board for Transformations, which was founded by a good friend of mine, my brother in the struggle, Leroy Cruz, and a member of the Rise Center's Planning Committee. I love that place. Lastly, God blessed me with a helpmate and wife, Kathy Lloyd Diaz, doctor, PhD. We became one in August of 2014. And in 2017, I was granted funding through the Council of Chemical Abuse for Spanish bilingual family support groups, which have been successful and still continues to impact the Hispanic and Latino community. I recently earned some certifications as a RAP facilitator, rational living therapist, and a family recovery specialist. I aspire to continue progressing in my behavioral health education. My life of turmoil to the life I treasure has made me a stronger person. I am a person today working to improve myself, knowing that I fall short daily. I have learned from my past that today is another day and tomorrow is only promised if I make it past today by God's grace. I have and continue to work with families that struggle with codependency, not knowing how to work with their loved one who is struggling with addiction and mental health challenges. Families that do not know how to handle the pressure put on them by a family member in addiction or in recovery that constantly use their kindness for weakness. By applying my personal experiences in education, I have and continue to teach families how to set boundaries for themselves and their family members and friends. Today, I am a knight of the 21st century, AKA Robbie Newborn. Come on. Thank you for letting me read this. I normally speak without reading, but I felt that there were some things in here that were crucial to my story. One of the things that I learned when I was in Teen Challenge is that there's power in testimony. My pathway to recovery was different than many others, though I've had many experiences with TCs, which are therapeutic communities. When I was a kid, I grew up around the methadone clinic and that scenery, been around the acupuncture scene, been around where people would sell their methadone when it was, at that time, it was more take home. And would just mix it up with orange juice and sell it. Pills, back then, Valium and Black Beauties and such, it's the call. So I grew up in that environment, and it was tough. It wasn't easy. And later, in my personal experience, going through therapeutic communities in prison, learning about NA and AA personally, and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous. And then later going to 12-step programs. While I was in prison, I read the big book. One of the OGs, the older guys, used to say, Menol, youngster, you don't need to hang out with them no more. Basically, he was talking about the gang and the clique I was with. He said, listen, you smart, there's a leader in you. Program as much as you can so you can have good time. And if you can get into any programs that'll cut your time, get into them. You don't have to play the yard. And go to school. And that's what I did. And I go to different programs in church. So my experience in prison was a little different than a lot of people, because my experience was one that not only did I experience myself, but I saw my mother experience. And although we weren't in the same prison, we were locked up at the same time. And we would correspond to each other through mail. And I didn't even know my mother was upstate near me until one day I was working out, which, you know, I love doing. And a guy came up to me and says, "Yo, your mother told me to tell you hello." And I was like, "My mother told you what?" And I didn't, you know, I was caught by surprise. And right away, I'm thinking he's talking about my mother, you know. And he was like, "Chill, you know, you're the only buddy in the block that I know here." And so I said, "Okay, so how's, you know, how do you know her?" So he explained to me that he was her pen pal, and she wanted to correspond, and that's how we started corresponding. Um, and so that's why for me it was a little different than a lot of other people having that experience. My mother, which was strung out on crack and heroin, I think God saved her through using prison. Um, and of course, then my mother was released into work release before I even went down. And you know, I signed up for a program called KSAC, and I was able to get accepted, even though I had a violent crime for possession. And I went to KSAC, and that's how my time got cut short. And it was a therapeutic community, even more so, almost like a military shock, but not military, though we did early morning PT. But it was all programs. It's almost like if you was going to partial PHP all day, you know, and you had to keep your cubicle, because at this time I was in a dorm, not a cell. And we had inspection. So I wind up finishing second phase, going out into a halfway house. But one thing I did accomplish was I got my GED. You know, I dropped out of high school when I was about 15, you know, involved with street gangs and street crews. And of course, I was high and addicted at that time as a teenager, alcoholic, drug abuser. You know, my escape was the street from the horrors of where I lived. And, you know, my story is my story. I don't tell nobody else's story except that my experiences with my parents were real. Um, they're not here. They're both deceased. In fact, my stepfather's deceased as well. Um, and I'm pretty sure that my mom is proud of me, and my mom wouldn't mind, because she would have tell her story as well. She's not here to do that. Um, so when she was released, I was later released, and I got to see my mother briefly. Um, I was in a halfway house, and 3 months later, my mother passed away, and it really hurt me. It hurt me bad, um, because I got to see my mother clean and sober. No more was she insane. No more was she stuck in the bondage and insanity of addiction actively. But she was in recovery, and she was taking an active role in it. She looked beautiful. And my mother passed away. The last words I heard my mother say was, "I love you, Papito." Spend the day with her. I had curfew. I had to go back. She was, you know, okay at staying with my godmother. We watched Passenger 57 and Universal Soldier. Kissed my mother, hugged her, walked down the hall. She said, "I love you, Papito." Last words I heard my mother say. I was 19 years old, and it hurt me. Um, we buried my mother a week before my birthday. And a week later, after my mother's burial, I had another tragic act, very traumatic. I met a young lady during that time that my mother was out and I was out. And make a long story short, I found her and my cousin dead in my aunt's home, and that took me to another level because I was on work release and I was, trying to stay clean and in the halfway house. Um, I got hit at the board for with a year, but I was still trying to maintain my sobriety at the time, and my family members were encouraging me to seek um, professional help, but I didn't want to at the time. So what I did was after I found out how long I had to see my parole and didn't have to report, I would dib and dab with alcohol because it was easier to get away. Um, and so my life, spiraled again. Although I was still trying to stay clean, and I had this thing in my mind, I want vengeance, and I felt like I was left alone again. My father, he passed away when I was very young, um, about 16. Complications of HIV and AIDS. My stepfather died a few years after my mother, and I started to lose a lot of people in my life, either from overdoses, um, HIV, AIDS, other sicknesses, illnesses, gun violence, violence in particular, any type of violence. And I had a way to kind of escape that. That was I went to Brooklyn, and my life changed. I actually maintained some sobriety. I stopped, the dipping and dabbing for a little while. Went to school, LaGuardia Community College, and got married. And once I started doing well and I saw myself doing good, I guess my head got puffed up with pride. I have to admit that now. I didn't admit it then. And the cycle started again. I started dibbing and dabbing with cocaine and started dibbing and dabbing with other drugs. And I used to pass Teen Challenge all the time and never even knew that it was Teen Challenge. Check that out. I used to go, I was a driver for delivering surgical supplies. So I would go back and forth, and my mother-in-law lived around the corner at the time, and I see the sign Teen Challenge, and I'm laughing. I'm like, oh, this must be for kids that have mental problems. I laugh, man. I was that kid with the mental problems. I was that kid that was strung out on drugs. So that day was amazing when I went to speak to Brother Murrow, because not only did I get accepted to the program, but I also um, became born again Christian. He said it's not required, it's not mandatory, but you've been influenced by all of these religions. You was upstate. My uncle, my aunt, I love you, Theo Joe and Titiata. They took me in when I was homeless, and they had an older gentleman come. He was an elder of the Kingdom Hall, and he would come and have Bible studies with me. He was a produce farmer, so he would bring bags of produce. Of course, I'm gonna meet with him, but I was learning some stuff, and so he said, do you want to accept Jesus Christ in your life for real? And I said, yeah. I fell in the chair and I cried. I wept like a baby, and I accepted Christ in my life, February 16, 2009. And I negotiated 3 days, ironically, 3 days, right? Dead man. And then 3 days later. And so, of course, I wanted to go back out and get high, and I did. Wednesday night came, got home. I figured if I stay home Wednesday night, I could wake up early morning, Thursday, and I'll make it. And I did. My aunt, who was reluctant to take me, she took me, thank you, Angie. And she took me. I had my bags, my maleta, went to Teen Challenge to where I was like, yo, this is crazy. And I said, bye, Titi. And I walked into Teen Challenge February 19, 2009. And that's where it all started. That's my soberversary. I celebrate that because it's important. It's important to know that date for me to remind me that today I am a person of long-term sobriety, 11 years and 7 months. I count months, I count days. That's how we do it, right? Because it's really important to me. Sobriety means a whole lot. Recovery is important. And, for a long time, when I started to get into this, going to Teen Challenge and learning about, a faith-based model, the moral model, and then thinking about where I was in my experiences, even with therapeutic communities, it was different. I tell you how even different. I'm a street rapper. I've rapped since 1985. I was young. My uncle, I emulated my uncle Rodney, Rasta Rock, and the guys would rap, and I'm like, yo, I could do that. I start rapping. They're like, whoa, you need to read your Bible. It's like my Bible. So I went to God's Mountain, and I started to learn how to be a godly man. I was discipled. I had a counselor, who helped me on a one-on-one individual counseling session. A lot of it was biblical. Most of it was, but he was also clinical. So he would teach me some clinical aspects and go through some different evidence-based practices with me. And then we had group therapy, Stepping into Freedom, which was a 12-step out of the Steps of Wholeness, which originated where Bill and Bob started the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, which were more faith-based with Jesus, God, and later higher power, which also celebrate recovery, which is another awesome 12-step program, adapted. And with them, they do the scriptures in between each step, which was what we did at Teen Challenge. And then, just like when I was upstate and I would program and do all these programs, I had the opportunity to be part of ministry. And I started to learn about ministry. And I was like in all of these ministries that I named. And I started to really, really, really see the purpose that God had for me. It wasn't just to get sober, not to just get clean. It was to be habilitated, not rehabilitated, because he wanted me to get clean, but to be changed in that process. So yes, I could have went to and got rehabilitated and that was it. Came out clean, and then what? But I was habilitated because I became the man that I am today. I became a disciple of Christ through my pathway in recovery. I became the man that led other men, that helped other men, that would be used by God to disciple other men. And I've helped other individuals as well. And so going into the community, I learned community and ministry, and I put it together, and it's all about giving back. Ministry is giving back. And outside of ministry, if you're not in faith-based, it's still called outreach, but it's also called community service. And so while doing that and learning and emulating Brother Poteet with ministry, and then Brother Joel with ministry and outreach and drug prevention programs, and seeing other leaders growing and how it was serious and being disciplined, and taking the scripture and really applying it to your life and how each day matters, right? One day at a time is what they say in the rooms. It works if you work it, it's worth it. In the biblical context, the way the word of God says it, says if you pick up your cross, you carry it and crucify your flesh daily. For me, it was like, whoa, and people can fall because if you go through the stages of change, pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and then relapse, which is not required, but it's possible. I always like to say, if you're going to fall forward, right? It's easy to get back up. And even if you fall backwards, doesn't mean that you fail. Okay? You can still get the help that you need, but you got to want it. There's a lot of people that's there to help you or to assist you. You help yourself. And so I take all that and I'm like, wow. And I learn and I learn. And I think about the parable of the paraplegic with the pool of Bethesda, where people are going in, jumping out, and they're clean. And the guy's on his mat, and this man comes and says, "What happened? What's going on? Why aren't you in the pool?" He says, "Because nobody wants to help me." Remember that word. Nobody wants to help me. So the guy says to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and go." Because basically, you got to help yourself. Go. I'm assisting you by telling you where to go, where you need to be, where you want to be, right? He jumped in the pool, came out, and he was healed. And it says that the man, and it doesn't really tell you who the man was. Some versions might say his name, Jesus. Others may not say, but it's known that it is Jesus who he sees. And so I thought about that. I said, wow, oh my God, God is talking to me through all this time. And so I kept on and kept on. And I wanted to go to school. And, my counselor at the time was in Alvernia. And that's ironic how I wanted to be a respiratory care therapist at Thaddeus Stevens. But because of my background, my advisor said, listen, you could go to the program, but you're not going to get a job in the hospital. Because I was a medical assistant. I've had that experience. Okay, I've worked in podiatry. I was a surgical technician. Didn't get certified, but I went through the whole practicum. Actually went to my didactic, not my practicum in the hospital. I failed out and wound up graduating in LaGuardia with my associates. But I was able to, so I was like, man, let me go here. But she said, no, Robert, don't waste your time, basically. I got a place for you, Alvernia. And it turns out my counselor at the time was at Alvernia. So it was pretty cool to have, later on when I graduated, knowing, hey, he's at Alvernia and I'm at Alvernia. So I had a mentor and support there, and many other young ladies and older women and young men and older men that were my colleagues and my schoolmates. And man, we helped each other. And so, here I am, my bachelor's. I decided I needed to just be in the community and do more because I felt the community was hurting. I felt like God already had me staying still, which I kept hearing. What are you going to do when you graduate? Just stand, just stay still. And I did that. And I thought, man, you know what, Lord? Man, I want to do something bigger. And he opened that door, and I went to Berks Counseling Center. And prior to that, I got married to my wife, Catherine Diaz. I call her Kate Sunshine because she radiates the sun, Jesus Christ. She's definitely my helpmate. We have our struggles, but who doesn't? I pay it forward. I press forward. Philippians 3:12. I'm not saying I attained it all, but I know one thing. I'm pressing forward toward the goal. And so while I was out in the community working for BCC, and I had my master's in community leadership, I wanted to develop a program. I had put together my capstone, a peer mentoring program. I already started Walk It Out Ministries on my way to New Jersey to see a friend that was struggling with cancer who passed away later. My friend says, yo, Robbie Newborn, what is going to be the name of your ministry? And as soon as he said that, the song came out. Walk it out. Walk it out. Walk it. He said, walk it out. And I said, there it goes. Walk it out. What better title to walk it out and be an example, right? And so I started Walk It Out Ministries. My capstone was Walk It Out Peer Mentoring Program. And a friend of mine, shout out Sam Rock, Soul Winners with a Z. He said, listen, you can start your own business. And I did. I started Walk It Out Recovery Services. where we do drug prevention in schools, public arenas, any institution, jails. We do family groups. We right now we're doing Spanish bilingual family support groups. Thank you, Counselor on Chemical Abuse, for initiating that and helping us to be able to continue. I brought up the idea and they loved it. And I've been able to go out into the community and help a lot of people and families to learn what to educate them on what recovery is, what addiction is, codependency, all those things, those good, nice things, right? That some of us don't understand and some of us don't want to even know because of stigma, right? And been able to in BCC work with mental health and combining the two as co-occurring and dual and comorbid, and just comorbidity and being able to work with individuals. And then one thing that I did also learn was meeting people where they are, not being program centered, but being person centered and using a harm reduction model, which for a long time I wasn't really feeling it because I come from the confrontational era. I come from the way that this is the program, this is how it is. If not, then there's a discipline or there's a consequence. But I learned that there's a harm reduction model, and harm reduction is MAT, medicated assisted treatment. There's even marijuana dependence. You can have there's even medication to help you with that. So I started to learn about this and I was like, wait a minute. The disease model makes a lot of sense. There's a dis-ease of the brain, and then all these chemical imbalances and everything, how drugs hijack the system. This is real. I say that I'm a person of long-term sobriety because I don't like negative labels. I know what addiction is. I know what abusing drugs is. I know what dependency is. I know those are the levels and stages of addiction. I know that it starts with experimental, occasional, which can also be social use, abuse, and dependence. I've been through all those stages. But I feel that through my walk and my discipleship and being born again, that I've been through a healing process. You cannot doubt it that for many people, not all people, the brain can heal, depending on how much damage has been done, either for mental illness, mental challenges, and for addiction. So I'm a person of long-term sobriety, but I learned how to meet people where they are because it's important to meet them where they are using evidence-based practices like motivational interviewing. It's very crucial. CBT, man, cognitive behavioral therapy, rational living therapy, the RAP program, wellness recovery action plan. Oh my God, there's so many evidence-based practices that you can use and meet people where they are. And when I was in the ACT team, it was a little struggle, having, to meet a client, a consumer that's high on K2. Of course, if they're really, really high, you just set up another date, of course. But he's using and he's in recovery in the process. But is he in contemplation or pre-contemplation? And so those are the things that I learned. And the stages of change, man, helped me a lot. It helped me a lot. And so going through that process, and starting Walking Out Recovery Services, doing all these interventions, family, and then also doing faith-based support and life skills coaching, we have been able to do a lot. I urge you, please, reach out to me. I have a passion for what I do. Listen, I'm not perfect. We all make mistakes. But they say a righteous man falls 7 times, but he gets back up. Anybody, again, can slip, can relapse. They get back up is what counts, okay? It doesn't mean that you failed, but you get back up. Today, I'm a person of long-term sobriety. Yes, I am proud. My pride is that Jesus Christ, my Savior, my higher power, put me through the grinder, but he had his arms open like this, and he said, come, my son. And he's still there for me, and he could be there for you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I wish I had more time. Remember, this is my story. I hope that it resonates. I hope that my family and my friends are not offended. I said my uncle's name, and I said their names because it's important. And they know where I'm at today. I love you, Deals. And there's many others who are father-like figures and mentors to me. Thank you, y'all. Agape Phileo. Come on. All right. Q&A.
Thank you, Robert. Thank
Yes.
you. You are your story is powerful.
Thank you.
And it's powerful in so many ways. And what I heard you talk about was there's a song that says, "We fall down, but we get up." And that's what your story reminded me of, was that we fall down, but we get up. And it is by grace. It is by grace and God's grace that we get up. But you move forward tenfold. Like,
Yes.
it was purposeful existence is what I wrote down when I was hearing your story and you're talking about what you're doing today. And just the change, the 360-degree change that you've had in your life, and how you're giving back, and you do so tirelessly and faithfully, that it's just, you are just a strong representation of change and what recovery looks like for so many. That I just want to say thank you for your story and for sharing. There is a question.
Yeah.
We have a young lady that asked a question, and she says, what, if any, challenges does the Latino community face in recovery that might be different from other cultures or communities?
Oh, I'll tell you straight up. The language barrier. And of course, stigma. You know that I know, if the Latino community, lo que pasa en la casa stays in the house, right? You don't talk about what happens at home. And a lot of the mothers and the parents, the fathers, enable. But when I was an outpatient clinician for Birch Counseling Center, I had the opportunity. I was hired as a bilingual counselor, and it started with substance abuse. I was the IOP counselor, did groups and one-on-one. But because I was really the only bilingual counselor at the time, I had other caseloads that were put on that were just mental health. Some of them were dual. And while I was there, I started to think, man, there's something missing here. They're coming to see me and we're talking, but when they go home, where else can they go? What else can they do? Now you have churches, that's great. In fact, if you want, invite me to one of your Spanish churches or any church, I could come and I can do a presentation as well, and even a family support group. But they weren't, although they were going through that situation, they themselves didn't feel comfortable with sharing outside of the one-on-one what was going on at home or who else. And because they saw me as a Spanish-speaking male, bilingual, that they can open up and say, man, I have a brother, I have a father, I have a son, I have a husband, I have a mother, I have a friend that, needs help, and, there's no help. And so then later on, we got more people, but my thing wasn't that it wasn't so much of, we already knew that there was a shortage of Spanish or bilingual clinicians. What about education? What about going out into the front lines, into the community and teaching these people? I would go to homes when I was the co-occurrence specialist at the ACT in the ACT program, and a lot of the families spoke Spanish. And a lot of them, I'm gonna tell you that if it wasn't for me to be able to go there, they would find it real difficult to come. Even though they would, because of course we had other co-workers that were Spanish speaking and bilingual, but they would have to then come all the way over there if they wanted to, and if they were bilingual themselves and they could speak a little English, it made it easier. But many of the ones who just spoke Spanish, if that person or myself wasn't there, they wouldn't come. So then they would be disenfranchised, right? They wouldn't get. They would be probably left not knowing that there's help somewhere. So it was really geared to go out to the community because the Hispanic community needed to get educated, needed to know, hey, there's a place called Pennsylvania Counseling down the street. There's a place called Family Care. There's a place called BCC. There's a place called Berks County Community Health. Even though they might live in Oak Brook, they know that. But what about the people that don't live in Oak Brook that are just coming from Puerto Rico? Because we had an influx of Puerto Ricans coming in, not to mention an influx of Mexicans coming in. And so where do they stand? And so I think it was the language barrier and the lack of the resources for them.
When you say lack of resources, are you speaking about the language in terms of that? I mean, that's
yeah, because if they
speak with you, then it's not necessarily how are you going to help me?
Exactly. So like some of them are like, man, if this person doesn't understand me or can't communicate with me, how do I know they're not going to send me to immigration? How do I know they're not going to send me away or use me as a mule or whatever? And so they get scared because and then of course there's stigma. Un estigma. La gente tiene miedo, you know, they're scared, they're afraid, you know, especially if you're coming from Puerto Rico or from these other, you know, and of course they have a lot of family members that have been here for a long time, you know, but even then, you know, a lot of families are selfish, you know, they only want to look out for themselves. And that's because of the insanity of addiction. And of course, people are going to do what they need to do by all means necessary, you know. And so it's important. And that was what it was. It was the language barrier. Okay. You have a group of Hispanics or Latinos, right, that can't communicate. So then how do they know to go to an NA that's Spanish on Walnut? Mm-hmm. They don't know where to go. They don't know that they can go to the Spanish NA on Walnut, the AA on Walnut, and the Spanish 12-step group part of PA counseling. They would not know that. Mm-hmm. And so being able to go out there and give that resource is important.
And when I'm just curious, we talked about stigma, we talked about the language barrier. Is there any element of trust that's a factor as well? Just in terms of trust that I'm going to get the right services and I'm not going to be questioned or even, how do I want to say, set up, if you will. I'm just curious in terms of, you know, there's conversations that I have, you know, in terms of within the African American community, and there's a thought of first faith-based, like, you know, you need to go to church and God will save you and God will turn your life around. And then the other is that we don't talk about what's going on. You know, we don't put that out there in the public for fear of being judged or for fear of someone might be, you know, if I say something to somebody might not use that information against me.
Yeah, so trust is a big issue. So, you know, social media plays a big part in that. You know, I mean, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is, the news. And so you got many people who come in here illegally, you know, and many of them can be served too, because I have no problem. I'm not going to give up nobody that needs help. That's between them and whoever it is. So if you have a person that's authentic and has integrity and is coming to genuinely help you or assist you, right? Remember, you help yourself. Get through that process and educate you. That's gonna open that boundary, or that barrier is gonna open. And so for many of them, they see the news, they see how immigration is, they see how ICE is, They see all these things happening, or you have the gangs who then they fear, listen, if there's any gang members out there that are struggling with addiction, please don't be prideful. You can call me, you can talk to me too, all right? Because you know what? I'll meet you where you are. It's your choice to stay in or get out, but my concern is your well-being. Okay? That's anything else is none of my business. But there's people who are afraid, because, oh man, I'm on this block. If I go see Kelp right away, people are gonna think I'm snitching, or right away they think I'm talking. Listen, that word is being used wrong. Okay, it's being used wrong. Little kids are using it. It's being used wrong. And many people who know that's a prison term. You're not in the mafia. You're not in a big gang. Okay, so stop it. But the thing is that there's hope for everybody. My motto was this: there's hope for the hopeless. Okay, and so when you can't be able to go down the block to see somebody, or listen, even if there's a back to school giveaway and it's a church of and they're like, I'm not going. It's not that they're prideful, it's that they're scared. They're fearful of being around that environment because they're going to be labeled. Okay. And because I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of families in need. And it's not only teaching them about education and addiction and mental health. There's a lot of families out here. I know One Love, big shout outs to Tony Bellotto, One Love, City Lights, Pastor Joe, Fortress, Pastor Amanda, all these different, there's so many. And then they grow up in the church. Okay, so you got legalism in churches. Okay, I know my faith and I know what the word of God says, so nobody could confuse me, right? And but you got to read it for yourself. And yes, God loves, but God also chastises. He judges. He's not judgmental. Of course, God can't be judgmental, but he can judge you, because it's not about, hey, look what he's doing. It's about, yo, this is what you're doing. There's a consequence to it, but you're going to learn. So the thing is that the churches, that's why I'm willing to go into the churches, because I want them to understand that in their church, they can be taught about the disease model.
Sure.
Listen, it's about how the brain is hijacked and what happens and how people for many years can be stuck in addiction. People can say, well, it was their choice. Listen, addiction is not the choice. Picking up and using is the choice. It's genetics, being predisposed, and it's the environment. When we could go to cognitive and we could go to behavior, and you could go to nature and nurture, and you can even go to Genesis, the fall of man, the depravity of man, which was sin. So we could go there too. But the point is, let's meet the people where they are, and let's teach them what does drugs do and hijacks the reward system.
Yeah.
Let's teach that. And we got to do it in Spanish. If we got to do it in bilingual, let's do it in bilingual. I wish I spoke other languages, but I don't. I mean, my Spanish is not perfect. I do understand it. And many people, they know that Roberto is real with it. I do my best, but I get the point across, and I'm able to communicate it. But one thing else too that's important is that when we're out there and we're talking to people, it's not only about walk it out. It's about COCA. What does COCA do for you? What can they do? What resources they have? What Teen Challenge, PA, Pennsylvania Adult Teen Challenge could do for you? Okay, they have a new detox. Okay, they got a short-term clinical treatment facility, and then they got the long-term faith-based. Okay, then you have Revelations of Freedom, and you have all these other programs, and then you have Olga Crea. You got the salvation. They need to know. It's important for them to know that there's help for the hopeless.
Well, thank you, Robert. Thank you.
Yes.
This has been a very powerful evening for us. And so we want to thank all of those who were able to come out and join us this evening. And we want to invite you back next Tuesday. This is September. During the whole month of September, every Tuesday and Thursday, we're going to bring to you at 6 o'clock a speaker with passion, with commitment, and dedication to recovery. Next Tuesday, please join us at 6 p.m. where we'll hear from Tom Skornavaki himself, and he will talk about his journey in recovery. What a great testimony that will be. Also, we want to invite you to think about, we here at Berks Rise are very interested in continuing some semblance of this speaker series. And so we know that recovery works, and we know that there are many tangible pieces to recovery. It's not just about going to meetings, but it's also about living and living well. And so if there is a piece of information, a conversation, a subject matter that you would like us to tackle at Berks Rise that we can bring to you in your living room, in the comfort of your home virtually, please tap into berksrise.org on the website and let us know what you'd like to hear from us. And we're going to make that happen. The other thing I want to share with you is this is National Recovery Month. And if you have a 30-second video of what recovery means to you, and you can share that with us and upload it on our Berks Rise website, we will send you a t-shirt. And I'm going to ask Robert if he wouldn't mind modeling for me for a minute. Robert's wearing our Rise t-shirt, and on the front it has Berks Rise, as you can see. And then if he turns around, you also see that we are Recovery Out Loud Berks. And so we really want to let people know that Berks County is thriving in recovery, and there are 33,000 of us strong. We want people to know that. And so in order to get a t-shirt, because it's a limited edition, you will need to submit to us a 30-second video about what recovery means to you, or send us a snapshot of you with a paragraph of what recovery means to you, and we will get out to you a beautiful Berks Rise t-shirt. We want to thank you so much for continuing to support us and support recovery. Remember that we are just a click away from our social media, or give us a call, 610-376-8669, and let us know what recovery topic you would like to have even after Recovery Month. We want to kind of keep this energy going. We want to keep this style of communication open so that folks know that recovery is possible. So thank you for joining us. We wish you a good night, and be safe and be sober, be blessed. Thank you.